I'm a 31-year-old guy, and I've been dating my girlfriend Sharon, 29, for 2 years. Up until recently, everything between us was great. We were even talking about moving in together and seemed completely on the same page about our future. You know how sometimes you meet someone, and it just clicks? That's how it was with Sharon. Sure, we had the usual ups and downs, but nothing major, or so I thought. Then, about a week ago, something bizarre happened. Sharon disappeared. She just completely vanished, no calls, no texts, no updates on social media. It was so out of character for her that I couldn't wrap my head around it. At first, I didn't panic. I figured maybe she needed some space, or something unexpected had come up. Everyone needs a break sometimes, right? Day 1 passed, and I decided to give her some time. But when day 2 rolled around, I started feeling nervous. She wasn't responding to any of my texts, and when I called her phone, it went straight to voicemail. This wasn't like her at all. By day 3, my worry turned into full-blown panic. I started reaching out to our mutual friends to see if anyone had heard from her. But nobody had. No one had seen her or spoken to her since the last time we all hung out together. I even tried calling her sister, but she hadn't heard from Sharon either. Feeling frantic, I drove to her apartment to check if she was there. But the place was dark and empty. Her car wasn't in the parking lot, and her mailbox was overflowing with unread mail, which only made things worse. I stopped by her workplace as well, but they said she hadn't shown up for several days. My friends tried to reassure me, telling me to relax and not assume the worst. But as the days passed with no word from Sharon, my mind spiraled into all sorts of terrifying scenarios. Had she been in an accident? Or worse, the uncertainty was unbearable. On the 5th day, I reached my breaking point and went to the police to file a missing person report. I explained everything. The sudden disappearance, the lack of contact, and her uncharacteristic behavior. The officers took my statement, but they didn't seem particularly optimistic. They told me that sometimes people just go off the grid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. During this time, I could barely sleep. I kept having nightmares where I'd find her in some terrible situation or worse. Each time, I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my anxiety through the roof. I even tried tracking her phone, but it had been turned off the day she vanished. Another dead end. To make matters worse, some of my friends started pulling away. They told me I was becoming obsessed with finding her and suggested that maybe she had just ghosted me. That thought hadn't even crossed my mind before, but once they said it, it stuck. Could she really have just left me? It didn't make sense, but then again, what about this situation did? I started replaying our last few weeks together in my mind, trying to pinpoint if I had missed any signs. Was she distant? Unhappy? Did I do something to drive her away? I questioned everything, searching for any clue to explain why she would leave like this. Exactly 1 week after she disappeared, Sharon showed up at my door. It was late, around midnight, and I almost didn't hear the knock. When I opened the door, there she was, looking completely disheveled. Her hair was a mess, her clothes were wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in days. But what really threw me was that she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, clutching her hand tightly, was a little boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old. When I opened the door, Sharon just stood there, her hand gripping the little boy's tightly. She looked at me like she expected me to understand what was going on. But I didn't. I was completely speechless. "This is Tom," she said, motioning to the boy. That was it. No other explanation. I stared at her, my mind racing. Tom? Who's Tom? Where had she been? Why hadn't she called? A million questions ran through my head, but before I could ask anything, she stopped me. "I can't explain everything right now," she said quietly. "We need to talk, but not tonight." That was it. No answers, no explanations, just a vague promise of a future conversation. I was stunned, unable to process what was happening as she walked into my apartment with Tom in tow like nothing was out of the ordinary. Over the next few days, things didn't get any clearer. Every time I asked Sharon about what was going on, she brushed me off. "We'll talk soon," she'd say, but that conversation never came. Meanwhile, Tom never left her side. This kid clung to Sharon like his life depended on it. He wouldn't talk, not a single word. I tried asking him simple questions, thinking he might open up, but he'd just look at Sharon as if waiting for permission to speak, then stay silent. His behavior wasn't like any child I'd ever met before. Sharon, on the other hand, was acting stranger by the day. She'd whisper on the phone late at night, talking in hushed tones, and when I asked who she was talking to, she'd just say, "It's nothing," and change the subject. There were nights she'd leave the apartment with Tom, claiming she had errands to run, and not come back for hours. When I asked where she'd been, her answers were vague, just personal stuff. Nothing was adding up, and I was starting to lose my patience. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. We were having dinner, the air heavy with tension, and I decided to confront her. I asked her point blank, "Where have you been? Why haven't you told me about Tom? And what's really going on?" First, Sharon didn't say anything. Then, she broke down in tears. She apologized over and over, but even through her sobs, she refused to give me a straight answer. It's complicated, she kept saying. You wouldn't understand. That was the moment I realized I wasn't going to get any real answers unless I took matters into my own hands. Later that night, after Sharon and Tom went to bed, I decided to do some digging. We'd been together for 2 years, and not once had she ever mentioned a child. There were no photos of Tom, no social media posts, nothing. It didn't take long to figure out that Tom wasn't hers. There were no records of her having a child, no birth announcements, nothing to tie her to him. So who was this kid? The next day, I confronted her again. This time, I refused to back down. I demanded answers, and finally, she cracked. Sharon admitted that Tom wasn't her son. He was her nephew. Her sister, she explained, had gotten into serious legal trouble and had to leave the country in a panic. In her desperation, she left Tom with Sharon. I didn't know what to do, Sharon confessed. I was scared you'd judge me, or worse, that you'd leave me. I was stunned. I understood why she might have been afraid, but it didn't change the fact that she had lied to me for weeks. While I had been losing sleep and worrying about her, she had been hiding the truth. The worst part? Sharon admitted she didn't have the financial means to take care of Tom long-term. Her sister had left her in a mess, and now Sharon was the one dealing with all the fallout. She confessed that she didn't know how to handle it, but the stress was clearly wearing her down. I didn't know what to think. On one hand, I felt for her. She was clearly overwhelmed. But on the other hand, her lies and secrecy felt like a betrayal. As the days passed, I started questioning everything I thought I knew about Sharon. If she had lied about Tom, what else might she be hiding? Then one night, everything came crashing down. CPS showed up at our apartment. Someone, probably a neighbor, had reported concerns about Tom's living situation. They were there to investigate, asking questions about Sharon's ability to care for him and the environment he was living in. That night, Sharon broke down completely. She admitted that she had been hiding even more from me. Not only had her sister been in legal trouble, but Sharon herself was now entangled in it. She had been helping her sister financially, using money she had borrowed from me under false pretenses. All those times she told me the money was for rent or bills. It had actually been going to her sister. I felt sick. Not only had I been lied to, but now my own financial stability was at risk. The next day, I decided I needed to protect myself. I contacted a lawyer to figure out my options. The more I thought about the situation, the more I realized I had to put myself first. But just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Sharon's sister's ex-boyfriend showed up at the apartment, claiming to be Tom's biological father. He demanded custody of the child, and the situation escalated into a shouting match. CPS had to step in again, and this time they placed Tom in temporary foster care while they investigated further. That was the breaking point for me. Sharon had dragged me into a situation I never signed up for, and the lies just kept piling up. I knew I couldn't stay in this relationship any longer, no matter how much I cared for her. After CPS took Tom into temporary foster care, I knew I had reached my limit. The weight of everything, the lies, the financial strain, the emotional manipulation, was crushing me. I didn't even recognize the person I'd become. For weeks, I'd been consumed by Sharon's chaos, and it was clear she wasn't going to change. I told Sharon I couldn't do it anymore. She begged me not to leave, but her pleas only made it harder. You can't just abandon me now, she cried. I need you. Tom needs you. But that was the thing. I hadn't signed up for this. I didn't sign up to be a parent, to be financially drained, or to be dragged into legal trouble because of her family's mess. I felt for Tom, I really did. He was just an innocent kid caught in the crossfire of all this. But I couldn't keep sacrificing myself to save Sharon from her own mistakes. I'm sorry, I told her, but I can't do this anymore. I need to take care of myself. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost caved. But then I remembered all the lies, all the nights I stayed awake worrying, all the money I had poured into this relationship while she kept me in the dark. I moved out of the apartment the next day. I stayed with a friend while I looked for a new place to live. It wasn't easy. The guilt weighed on me, and I kept wondering if I'd made the right decision. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep going like this. The weeks that followed were chaotic. Sharon's legal troubles worsened as more information about her sister's criminal activities came to light. To make matters worse, Sharon started making accusations against me, claiming I had known about her sister's crimes all along. Couldn't believe it. After everything I'd done to support her, she was trying to drag me down with her. I immediately contacted my lawyer and took steps to protect myself. I filed a restraining order against Sharon and cut off all financial ties. My lawyer also warned me that Sharon might try to claim we had some kind of financial partnership, which could mean she'd demand compensation for shared living expenses. The idea of her trying to squeeze more money out of me made my blood boil, but I wasn't going to let her manipulate me any longer. Then Sharon vanished again. She cut off all contact, disappearing without a trace. This time, I didn't try to find her. I was done. A few weeks later, CPS reached out to let me know that Tom had been placed with a relative on his mother's side of the family. I felt a wave of relief knowing he was safe, but it was bittersweet. Despite everything, I had grown attached to him. I hoped he would have a better life with his relatives, away from all the chaos Sharon had created. I still thought about him sometimes, wondering if he was okay, but I knew I had done all I could. With Sharon out of the picture and the legal issues behind me, I focused on rebuilding my life. Therapy became a lifeline for me. It helped me process the betrayal, the guilt, and the emotional toll of everything I'd been through. I also reconnected with friends and family who had been worried about me throughout the ordeal. They were a huge support system, helping me move forward and reminding me of who I was before all this happened. Eventually, I decided to make a fresh start. I sold my apartment, moved to a new city, and started a new job. It was scary, but it was also liberating. I wanted to leave behind all the painful memories of Sharon and the chaos she brought into my life. I also started dating again, but I was cautious this time. I set firm boundaries and prioritized trust and honesty in my relationships. I wasn't going to ignore red flags or settle for anything less than what I deserved. Months later, I got one final piece of closure. I found out that Sharon had been arrested in another state for her role in her sister's criminal activities. She was sentenced to prison, and while it was a shocking end to her story, it was also a relief. Felt like a chapter of my life was finally closing. I could move forward without looking over my shoulder, without wondering if she'd resurface and drag me back into her chaos. Looking back, I realized how much I had grown from this experience. It taught me the importance of boundaries, the value of self-respect, and the strength to walk away from a toxic situation. Now I'm in a better place. My life is quieter, simpler, and free of drama. I've built a strong support system of friends and family, and I'm focusing on my own happiness. As for Sharon, I don't know what the future holds for her, and honestly, I don't think about it much anymore. My priority now is building a life that's stable, fulfilling, and drama-free. Thank you to everyone who supported me during this journey. Your advice and encouragement helped me find the strength to walk away and start over. Here's to a brighter future, and hopefully no more surprises.